I decided to visit my husband at his job as a CEO. At the entrance, there was a sign that said, "Authorized personnel only." When I told the guard I was the CEO's wife, he laughed and said, "Ma'am, I see his wife every day. There she is coming in right now." My name is Emily Moore. I'm 34 years old, originally from London, and until that Tuesday afternoon in September, I thought I knew my husband better than anyone in the world. Please follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought a simple surprise visit would reveal that I'd been living a lie for 6 years, that the life I'd built, the sacrifices I'd made, the career I'd abandoned, the ocean I'd crossed, all of it had been for a man who was living a completely different existence when I wasn't looking. A man who had constructed such an elaborate deception that even the security guard at his building knew more about his real life than I did. It started as such an innocent idea. My husband Daniel had been working late again. Those endless 12 and 14-hour days that came with being CEO of Apex Innovations, a tech company specializing in artificial intelligence solutions. I'd been eating dinner alone too many nights, watching British television shows by myself on the streaming services, trying to ignore the growing silence in our marriage, the way our house felt more like a hotel where we occasionally crossed paths than an actual home. That morning, he'd rushed out without his usual coffee, stressed about some board meeting he couldn't tell me about because I wouldn't understand the technical details. His exact words were, "It's complicated, Em, just boring corporate stuff." I thought bringing him his favorite latte from the coffee shop 3 blocks from our house and the lemon scones I'd spent all morning perfecting from his mother's recipe might brighten his day, maybe remind him that I still existed, maybe spark something that had been dying slowly for months. I'd woken up early, spent 2 hours in the kitchen getting those scones exactly right. The kitchen smelled like lemon and butter and hope, pathetic hope that a baked good could save a marriage I didn't even know was already over. The downtown office building gleamed in the autumn sunlight as I pulled into the visitor parking space. 20-story glass and steel tower, all modern angles and reflective surfaces, the kind of building that was meant to intimidate, to announce success and power and importance. I'd only been to Daniel's office twice in 6 years. Once when he first got the position 3 years ago, when he'd given me a quick tour of the executive floor, barely introducing me to anyone before rushing me back out because he had an urgent call. And once for a company holiday party where I'd felt like an awkward accessory he'd forgotten to introduce properly, standing by the catering table while he networked and laughed with colleagues who looked right through me. He always said it was easier to keep work and home separate, that I wouldn't understand the corporate politics, the competitive dynamics, the complex relationships that governed his professional world, that he wanted to protect me from that stress and pressure, that home should be my sanctuary, not another place where I had to perform or prove myself. I should have questioned why I needed protecting. I should have asked why his work life was so carefully guarded from me, but I didn't. I was the good wife, the understanding wife, the wife who didn't make demands or ask uncomfortable questions. The lobby was all glass and steel and polished marble, the kind of intimidating American corporate space that still felt foreign to me after 8 years in the States. Everything was bigger here, louder, more assertive. Even the architecture seemed designed to make you feel small unless you belonged. A massive reception desk dominated the center of the space, flanked by security turnstiles and a wall of screens showing stock tickers and company logos. A security guard sat behind the imposing desk, his nameplate reading William Chen in crisp block letters. I approached, clutching my carefully prepared offerings like a schoolgirl bringing an apple to the teacher. The coffee was still hot. The scones were wrapped in parchment paper tied with twine because I'd seen that in a magazine and thought it looked thoughtful. "Good afternoon," I said, approaching with what I hoped was a confident smile, though I could hear my accent getting thicker, the way it always did when I was nervous. "I'm here to see Daniel Moore. I'm his wife, Emily." William looked up from his computer screen. His expression shifted from professional courtesy to something I couldn't quite read. Confusion mixed with concern, something that looked almost like pity. "You said you're Mr. Moore's wife?" His voice carried a note of disbelief that made my stomach tighten. The way you'd speak to someone who just claimed to be royalty or said something that couldn't possibly be true. "Yes, that's right. Emily Moore." I held up the coffee cup and paper bag like evidence. "I brought him lunch. Thought I'd surprise him." William's expression changed completely. His eyebrows shot up, and then he did something that made my blood run cold, that made the marble floor feel like it was tilting beneath my feet. He laughed. Not a polite chuckle or an awkward clearing of the throat, but a genuine, bewildered laugh that echoed through the marble lobby and seemed to bounce off every reflective surface. The kind of laugh that said I'd just told the most absurd joke he'd heard all week. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I see Mr. Moore's wife every day." He gestured toward the elevators with casual certainty, like he was pointing out something obvious that I should already know. "There she is now, coming back from lunch." I turned, following his gaze, my body moving in slow motion, and watched a woman stride through the lobby. She was younger than me, maybe 28, with perfectly highlighted blonde hair that caught the light like something from a shampoo commercial. She wore a cream-colored designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her heels clicked against the marble with the confidence of someone who belonged, who owned every space she entered. She carried shopping bags from Nordstrom and a leather tote that matched her shoes perfectly. A massive diamond ring caught the light on her left hand, throwing tiny rainbows across the wall. She was everything I wasn't: American, polished, young. The kind of woman who looked like she'd been born wearing high heels and knowing exactly how to navigate corporate hierarchies. She nodded to William with familiar ease, the intimacy of people who see each other every single day. "Afternoon, Bill. Daniel's expecting me back." "No problem, Mrs. Moore." William's voice was warm, friendly, the voice you use with someone you know well. "Mrs. Moore." The words hit me like a physical blow, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed. The coffee cup slipped from my hand. I didn't even notice the hot liquid splashing against my shoes, soaking through the canvas, burning my feet. I just stood there, watching this stranger walk away wearing my name like it belonged to her. "Sarah, right?" William called after her. "Don't forget your husband has that conference call at 3. "Already on his calendar." She waved without turning around, her voice bright and cheerful, the voice of someone whose life made sense. She disappeared into the elevator and I watched the numbers light up. 10, 11, 12. The executive floor. My floor. Except it had never been my floor at all. William was looking at me now with something that might have been concern, or might have been suspicion. I was just standing there, coffee pooling around my feet, holding a bag of homemade scones, and I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't process what had just happened. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need me to call someone?" I found my voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "How long?" "Excuse me?" "How long has Sarah been coming here? How long has she been Mrs. Moore?" William shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware that he'd wandered into something much bigger than a simple case of mistaken identity. "Ma'am, I don't think I should—" "Please." The word came out broken. "I need to know." He sighed, his professional demeanor cracking just enough to show actual human compassion. "I've been working this desk for 3 years. She's been Mrs. Moore the whole time I've known her. Every day, sometimes twice a day. Everyone here knows her." 3 years. Daniel had been living a double life for 3 years, maybe longer. 3 years of lying to my face every single morning and every single night. 3 years of kissing me goodbye while kissing her hello. 3 years of building an entire existence that didn't include me. But they had no idea what was coming next. I made it to my car before I started shaking. My hands trembled so violently I couldn't get the key in the ignition. I just sat there in the parking garage, in the dim concrete space that smelled like exhaust and oil, staring at nothing, trying to piece together a puzzle I hadn't even known existed. 3 years ago, that was when everything changed. Let me tell you how I got here. How a girl from London who once had dreams and ambitions and a life of her own became the woman sitting in a parking garage, covered in coffee, discovering her entire marriage was a lie. It started 8 years ago when I was 26 and working at the Whitmore Gallery in Shoreditch. I was the assistant curator specializing in contemporary British art. It wasn't glamorous, the pay was terrible, but I loved it. I loved the smell of paint and canvas. I loved discovering new artists. I loved the opening nights where collectors and creators came together and you could feel the electricity of art changing hands, ideas exchanging value. I had a tiny flat above a Pakistani restaurant. I could walk to work. I knew every coffee shop in a 6-block radius. My life was small, but it was mine. Daniel had been visiting from Seattle for a tech conference, and he'd wandered into the gallery on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, looking for shelter. He was charming in that American way that felt exotic to me then, all confidence and white teeth and big gestures. He talked about changing the world through technology, about building something that mattered, about making an impact. When he looked at me, I felt seen in a way I'd never experienced before. He asked me questions about the art on the walls, actually listened to the answers, came back the next day, and the next. By the end of the week, we were having dinner. By the end of the month, we were talking about forever. Every single time my friends expressed concern about the speed, about the distance, about the practical complications of an international relationship, I brushed them off. I was young and romantic and naive enough to believe that love conquered everything. Oceans, careers. The practical voice in my head that whispered, "This is happening too fast." We were married within 6 months. A small ceremony at the registry office in Camden, just a handful of friends, and my bewildered mother, who kept pulling me aside, asking if I was sure, really sure, because this was so fast and I barely knew him, and what about my career and my life and everything I'd worked for? "Mom, I love him," I'd said. "Isn't that what matters?" She'd looked at me with such sadness. "Love isn't enough, darling. Love is just the beginning. But I didn't listen. I gave up everything to move to Seattle with him. My job at the gallery, my flat in Shoreditch, my friends, my family, my entire life in London. Daniel had just been promoted to VP at a tech startup called Innovate Fast, and he said he couldn't move to the UK. His career was taking off. This was his moment. We had to stay in America. Don't worry, he'd promised me on the plane, holding my hand as England disappeared below the clouds. We'll visit London all the time. You'll build a new career here. This is our adventure together, you and me against the world. But the visits to London never happened. There was always a reason. Too expensive, too busy, bad timing, next year, soon, maybe next Christmas. And every time I mentioned wanting to work, Daniel had reasons why it wasn't the right time. You're still adjusting to the culture here. Give yourself time to settle. The visa situation is complicated. Let's wait until your work authorization comes through properly. Why don't you focus on making our home beautiful? I need a sanctuary after these brutal work weeks. I need to come home to peace, not more stress. So I became the perfect corporate wife. I attended the right dinner parties where everyone talked about property values and stock options. I made small talk with the right people's wives about farmers' markets and yoga studios. I wore the right clothes to the right events, always careful not to be too British, too different, too much. I learned to hide my accent when it made Americans uncomfortable, when I could see them straining to understand me. I learned to smile and nod when people made jokes about tea and the Queen that weren't actually funny but required polite laughter. I learned to make myself smaller, quieter, less. 3 years ago, Daniel's startup was acquired by a larger tech firm for $40 million. Overnight, we went from comfortable to wealthy. Daniel became CEO of the newly formed Apex Innovations. His salary tripled. Our modest 3-bedroom house became a 5-bedroom Craftsman in Queen Anne. Our sensible sedans became a Tesla and a BMW. Our dinner parties became catered events. Our conversations became shorter. That's when everything changed, though I didn't see it then. He started working later, traveling more, coming home after I'd gone to bed, leaving before I woke up. The few hours we spent together were him on his laptop and me pretending to read while actually just watching him work, waiting for scraps of attention. I threw myself into making our house perfect, decorating every room, learning to garden so our yard looked like something from a magazine, taking cooking classes so I could make American comfort food that Daniel barely ate because he was never home for dinner, joining a book club with other corporate wives who talked about their husbands' careers like they were their own achievements, like proximity to success was the same as having it. But I had a secret. The secret that kept me sane was my grandmother's inheritance. When she died 2 years ago, she left me a substantial sum, nearly £2 million, money that had been in our family for generations, passed down from my great-great-grandfather who'd made a fortune in textiles during the Industrial Revolution. Money that represented independence and possibility and choices. Money that Daniel knew nothing about. "Why do you need your own money?" he'd asked once, early in our marriage, when he'd seen a statement from my London bank accidentally left on the kitchen counter. "We're married. What's mine is yours. That's how this works." But somehow, what was his was never really mine. His salary went into accounts I couldn't access. His stock options were in trusts I didn't understand. His business decisions were none of my concern. His work life was a locked door I wasn't allowed to open, a world where I existed only as a footnote, if at all. So I'd kept my grandmother's inheritance secret. moved it to new accounts he couldn't find, invested it quietly through a financial advisor in London who'd known my family for decades, watched it grow while I shrank. It was my escape plan, though I didn't think of it that way then. It was just mine. The only thing in my life that was completely, entirely mine. 6 months ago, things got worse. Daniel started coming home even later, sometimes not until after midnight. He'd shower immediately when he got home, washing away the day before I could even greet him, before I could smell anything that might tell me where he'd been. His phone was always face down on every surface. He'd take calls in the car, in the garage, in his office with the door locked, anywhere I couldn't hear. When I asked about his day, he'd give me one-word answers. Fine, busy, long, exhausting. As if speaking full sentences to me required more energy than he could spare. When I suggested we take a vacation, maybe go visit my mother in London, maybe take that trip to Italy we'd always talked about, he'd say he was too busy. The company was at a critical juncture. There was a major merger in the works. Next year, soon, maybe, always maybe. When I mentioned maybe going to marriage counseling, just to reconnect, to find our way back to each other, he looked at me like I'd suggested we burn down the house. There's nothing wrong with our marriage, Emily. You're being dramatic. This is just a stressful time at work. You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under. And I'd back down. Because that's what I did. I made myself smaller so he could be bigger. Last month, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket while sorting laundry. Tiffany & Coder $15,000 for a diamond tennis bracelet. My heart lifted for just a moment. Maybe it was for me. Maybe he was planning a surprise for our anniversary. Maybe this was him trying, finally trying to close the distance between us. My birthday came and went with a bouquet of roses ordered by his assistant. I knew they were ordered by Jennifer because the card was in her handwriting. Happy birthday, Emily. Love, Daniel, generic, impersonal. The kind of flowers you send when you've been reminded to send flowers. Our anniversary passed with a dinner reservation he canceled at the last minute because of a board emergency. I sat alone at the restaurant for 45 minutes before I realized he wasn't coming. The waiter kept refilling my water glass, his sympathy making everything worse. I ate the anniversary special by myself, both entrees, because I'd already ordered and I refused to waste food out of spite or sadness or some combination of both. I never saw that bracelet. Now, sitting in the parking garage, coffee splattered on my shoes, I finally understood. That bracelet was for Sarah, the woman who got flowers delivered to the office, the woman who got surprise lunches and afternoon coffee runs, the woman who was living my life, the life I was supposed to have, while I sat at home in our empty house making scones that no one would eat. I pulled out my phone and did what I should have done months ago. I started searching. Sarah Moore, Seattle, brought up dozens of social media profiles. I scrolled through them with growing horror, each new image a knife wound to whatever was left of my heart. There, Sarah Moore, tagged in a photo from the Apex Innovations company picnic. The one Daniel said was just boring corporate stuff that I didn't need to attend. Too much shop talk, he'd said. You'd be bored out of your mind. In the photo, Sarah stood next to Daniel, his arm around her waist, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. She wore a sundress and his company t-shirt. He looked happy. Actually happy. More alive than I'd seen him in years. The caption read, Best CEO and First Lady in Tech. Power couple. Apex Innovations. Team leadership First Lady. They called her the First Lady of his company. I kept scrolling, each image worse than the last. Sarah at Daniel's side at a tech conference in San Francisco, both of them wearing matching lanyards and name badges. Sarah giving a speech at a charity gala I'd never heard about. Daniel in the background looking at her with such pride it made me physically nauseous. Sarah cutting a ribbon at the opening of Apex's new facility. Daniel beaming beside her like a proud husband at his wife's accomplishment. Sarah and Daniel at what looked like a company retreat, both in hiking gear, surrounded by other employees, clearly part of the inner circle, the important people. My husband had a whole public life with another woman. While I sat at home, invisible and irrelevant, he was parading around with his real partner, introducing her to everyone who mattered, building a life where I simply didn't exist. Every photo was another year of my life wasted, another sacrifice that meant nothing, another piece of evidence that I'd been a fool. I drove home in a daze. The familiar route, streets I'd driven hundreds of times, suddenly felt foreign, like I was seeing Seattle for the first time, or maybe like I was seeing it clearly for the first time, not as my home, but as the city where I'd been erased. Our house, the beautiful Craftsman and Queen Anne that Daniel had picked out, that I'd spent 2 years decorating with such care, that I'd filled with furniture and art and the illusion of a real life, looked different now, like a stage set, like something built to be photographed but not lived in, like a lie made of wood and paint and my own desperate hope. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it that morning. The kitchen still smelled like lemon scones. My coffee cup still sat by the sink, the lipstick stain on the rim, a ghost of the woman who'd believed her biggest problem was that her husband worked too much. I went straight to Daniel's home office. The door was always locked. He said it was because of sensitive work documents, confidential company information, legal requirements around data security. He made it sound so reasonable, so necessary, so much about protecting the company rather than protecting secrets. But I knew where he kept the spare key, in his sock drawer upstairs, hidden inside a rolled-up pair of dress socks that I'd washed and folded hundreds of times. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been maintaining the very system designed to hide the truth from me. The office was exactly what I'd expected now that I knew the truth. Corporate, impersonal. No photos of us anywhere, no wedding pictures, no vacation snapshots, no evidence that we'd ever existed as a couple, just a shrine to his professional life. But there was a photo of Sarah on his desk, not even hidden, just sitting there in a silver frame. Professional headshot, but intimate. The kind of photo you keep close because you love looking at it. She was smiling, her head tilted slightly, her eyes bright with the kind of happiness I used to feel before it got buried under years of silence and diminishment. I couldn't take it anymore. I sat at his desk and opened his laptop. He'd never bothered to change his password. It was still the same one from 6 years ago. Apex CEO 2021. Why would he change it? I was just Emily, the quiet British wife who stayed home and didn't ask questions. The wife who could be trusted not to snoop because she'd been trained so well not to make waves. His email was a goldmine of deception, a comprehensive archive of a double life maintained with meticulous care. Messages between him and Sarah discussing dinner plans, weekend trips to Portland and Vancouver that he'd told me were business conferences, apartment viewings, furniture shopping, gift ideas for her birthday, plans for their future together that were shockingly detailed and horrifyingly real. My hands were shaking as I clicked on a forwarded listing, a luxury high-rise downtown, penthouse unit with floor-to-ceiling windows and views of Elliott Bay. $8,000 a month. The email chain revealed everything I'd been too trusting or too stupid to see. Daniel and Sarah had been living together in that apartment for the past 2 years. Our house, my carefully maintained home, the place where I waited and hoped and made scones, was where he stayed a few nights a week to maintain the fiction of our marriage, the place he came when he needed his alibi, his cover story, his legitimate life to balance out the real one. I was his lie. She was his truth. But it was the email to his lawyer that made me physically ill, made me have to lean over the trash can because I thought I might actually vomit. Subject: divorce strategy discussion. Mark, as we discussed, I need to move forward with the divorce from Emily within the next 6 months. The prenup should protect most of my assets, but I want to ensure minimal disruption to the business during the transition. Sarah and I are planning to marry next spring. We'd like to keep this as quiet as possible until after the TechCore merger goes through. Her parents have already started venue shopping for a May wedding. Key concerns: Emily has no income and has been unemployed for 6 years. Should be straightforward on alimony calculations. Her dependence works in our favor. No children to complicate custody or ongoing connection. She has no knowledge of company operations or assets. Information asymmetry is advantageous. Immigration status may be leverage if needed. Her work visa is tied to our marriage. She'll need sponsorship to remain in the U.S., which gives us negotiating power. Consider timing around Q4 bonuses and stock option vesting. April filing would be optimal. I want this to be as clean as possible. Emily's always been reasonable, accommodating. I don't anticipate significant resistance if we approach it correctly. She doesn't have the resources or knowledge to make this difficult. Let's discuss optimal strategy and messaging. I'm thinking something around grown apart, different life goals, mutual decision. Keep it amicable in appearance. Best, Daniel. I read that email 3 times, each word sinking deeper into my chest like a stone into water. He'd been planning this divorce for at least 4 months, probably longer, carefully documenting instances of what he called my withdrawn behavior, creating a narrative of our marriage that painted me as an inadequate wife who'd gradually become emotionally unavailable, who'd failed to grow with him, who'd chosen small domestic concerns over his big, ambitious dreams. The woman I'd been living with, loving, trusting, supporting for 6 years, had been systematically building a case against me while I'd been completely oblivious, while I'd been making his favorite meals and keeping his house clean and being understanding about his late nights and long trips. While I'd been performing the role of devoted wife, he'd been casting me as the obstacle to his real happiness. I made a decision. I sat there in his office surrounded by evidence of his real life, the life I'd never been invited to join, and I felt something shift inside me, something that had been compressed for years, finally expanding, taking up space, demanding room. For 6 years, I'd made myself smaller, quieter, more convenient. I'd hidden my education, a master's degree in art history from Oxford. I'd hidden my inheritance, £2 million and growing. I'd hidden my ambition, my intelligence, my entire self to fit into the box he'd built for me. A box labeled corporate wife, dependent spouse, acceptable accessory. Daniel thought I was trapped, dependent, helpless, a woman with no options and no resources, a woman who would accept whatever scraps of a settlement he offered because she had no choice. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. That was the last straw. I didn't confront Daniel that night when he came home at 11:30, smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't mine. I didn't scream or throw things or demand answers. I just smiled and asked about his day. "Long," he said, barely looking at me. "Exhausting board meeting." I made dinner. "It's in the fridge if you're hungry." Already ate. Client dinner. He headed for the shower. The same routine. Wash away the evidence. Remove any trace of his real life before interacting with his pretend one. I lay in bed next to him that night, listening to him sleep, and planned my next move. Because I wasn't the woman he thought I was. I was the granddaughter of Margaret Harrison, who'd served on the boards of both Sotheby's and the Tate Modern. I was the daughter of Caroline Harrison, who'd built her own property investment firm from nothing. I was the great-great-granddaughter of William Harrison, who turned a single textile mill into an empire. I came from women who didn't accept being diminished, who didn't go quietly, who didn't make things easy for men who'd underestimated them. It was time Daniel learned that. The next morning, I started making calls. First call, my financial advisor in London. "Emily, lovely to hear from you. How's Seattle treating you?" Richard Pemberton had been managing my family's investments for 30 years. He'd known me since I was a child. He was one of the few people who still called me by my maiden name sometimes, Harrison, as if reminding me who I'd been before I'd let someone else define me. "Richard, I need you to do something for me. That inheritance from grandmother, all of it. I need you to move it somewhere Daniel can't find it. Set up new accounts in my maiden name only, different banks, offshore if necessary. I'll need access to liquid capital quickly." There was a pause. Richard was too professional to pry, but I could hear the concern in his voice. "Is everything all right?" "It will be. But I need this done today. This morning, if possible. Consider it done. I'll have the paperwork ready for your electronic signature within the hour. Emily, if you need anything else, anything at all, you know I'm here." "I know. Thank you, Richard." Second call. An immigration lawyer specializing in spousal visa complications. I'd found her through an online search at 3 a.m. when I couldn't sleep, when I'd been lying next to Daniel, imagining all the ways he could use my immigration status against me. "Ms. Moore, I've reviewed your situation based on what you've told me. The good news is that after 8 years of marriage and 3 years since receiving your green card, your immigration status isn't as precarious as your husband might think. You have significantly more options than he's counting on." "What kind of options?" "You can apply for citizenship on your own. The marriage requirement for the green card has been fulfilled. You can demonstrate financial independence, which is crucial. Do you have your own income or assets that aren't joint?" I thought about my inheritance, now safely tucked away in accounts Daniel didn't know existed. Yes. Substantial assets. In my name only. Completely separate from my husband. Excellent. Then you have significantly more leverage than he realizes. We can file for citizenship independently. We can demonstrate that you're not financially dependent on him. We can prove you have the means to support yourself. His attorney is likely counting on you being scared and uninformed. We're going to prove him wrong. When can we start? I'll have my assistant send you intake paperwork today. We'll move quickly. Third call. The one that changed everything. I've been thinking about that email to Daniel's lawyer, about the merger he'd mentioned, about how he wanted to keep the divorce quiet until after the merger goes through, about the TechCore acquisition that would make him personally wealthy to a degree that seemed almost obscene. So I called an old friend from London, Marcus Ashworth. We'd gone to Oxford together. He'd gone into private equity, specializing in tech acquisitions. Last I'd heard, he was a partner at one of the major firms in London, the kind of person who moved billions of pounds around like game pieces. Emily Harrison, Christ, it's been ages. How's married life in the States? Hearing my maiden name felt like coming up for air after being held under water. Marcus, I need information. What do you know about a company called Apex Innovations? Daniel's company? We've actually been looking at them. Very interesting opportunity. They're in late-stage negotiations to be acquired by TechCore for about $200 million. Your husband stands to make a fortune if it goes through. Probably $30 to $40 million personally. Maybe more depending on his option structure. Why do you ask? My heart stopped. 30 to 40 million. No wonder he wanted to time the divorce carefully. When is this happening? Soon, next few months if the due diligence goes well. There are some concerns about leadership stability, corporate governance, the usual pre-acquisition jitters. But it looks solid. Emily, what's going on? You sound strange. I smiled for the first time in days. Marcus, I need to tell you something about the leadership stability at Apex Innovations. I told him everything. The double life, the secret apartment, the wife he paraded around publicly while keeping me hidden, the woman named Sarah who wore my title while I sat at home being erased, the plan to divorce me while using the merger timing to maximize his personal payout, the strategy to use my immigration status as leverage, the complete systematic deception that had defined the last 3 years of my life. This is his character, Marcus. This is the man running the company where your firm is considering a significant investment. This is who TechCore is planning to install as head of their Northwest division. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. I could hear him typing, probably taking notes. Emily, this is significant. This isn't just personal. This goes to character, judgment, integrity, the kind of things investors care about deeply. Would you be willing to share this documentation with our investment committee? If we're going to recommend this acquisition to our clients, we need to understand exactly who we're backing. Absolutely. I'll send you everything. I'm sorry this happened to you. Don't be sorry. Just help me make sure he doesn't get away with it. Over the next 2 weeks, while Daniel continued his routine, staying at the office late, showering immediately when he came home, taking calls in the garage, I built my case with the precision of someone who'd finally found a purpose after years of drift. I documented everything, every email between Daniel and Sarah, every text message I could access from his backed-up data, every social media post of them playing happy couple, every expense from our joint accounts that had gone toward maintaining their secret life, every lie he'd told me, cross-referenced with the truth I'd discovered. But more importantly, I started making calls to the people who mattered. It turned out that several of Daniel's major clients at Apex Innovations had worked with galleries I'd consulted for back in London. The tech world and the art world intersected in fascinating ways. Wealthy collectors who were also tech investors, people who valued art and technology equally, who understood that both required vision and integrity. I reached out to 3 of them. Casual emails at first. Reconnecting after all these years. I'm in Seattle now. Would love to catch up. Amazing how successful you've become. So proud to see it. The responses came quickly. They remembered me. They valued those old connections. One of them, Christopher Blackwell, a venture capitalist who owned one of the largest collections of contemporary British art in the Pacific Northwest, insisted on meeting for coffee. We met at a small cafe in Fremont, far from Daniel's usual circles. Christopher was in his 60s now, distinguished and sharp-eyed. "Emily Harrison, I had no idea you were in Seattle, and married to Daniel Moore. We've been one of Apex's major investors for 2 years now. Small world. Christopher, I need you to know something about the man you're investing in." I told him everything, not in anger or bitterness, but with the clinical precision of someone presenting facts. The double life, the secret apartment, the wife he paraded around publicly while keeping me hidden, the plan to divorce me while using the merger timing to maximize his personal payout. This is his character, Christopher. This is who he is when no one he respects is watching. I thought you deserved to know. Christopher's expression grew darker as I spoke. When I finished, he sat back in his chair, his coffee forgotten. "Emily, this is deeply troubling, not just personally, though that's awful enough, but this speaks to judgment, to ethics, to the kind of deception that makes investors very nervous. If he's capable of this level of personal duplicity, what else might he be hiding? What financial irregularities might we find if we looked more closely?" "I thought you might feel that way. Would you be willing to share this documentation with our board? With TechCore's acquisition team? Yes. This could destroy the merger." "I know." You should see their faces when the truth came out. Within 48 hours of my conversations with Christopher and Marcus, 3 major investors requested an emergency board meeting at Apex Innovations. They had urgent concerns about leadership integrity, questions about the CEO's character and judgment, doubts about whether someone capable of this level of personal deception could be trusted with their money and their reputations. The board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Daniel left that morning the same as always. Didn't kiss me goodbye, didn't even look at me, just grabbed his keys and his laptop and left for what he thought would be a routine meeting to finalize merger details. He had no idea that I'd already sent the complete documentation to every board member the night before. Every email, every photo, every receipt for the secret apartment and the gifts he'd bought Sarah. The divorce strategy email that outlined how he planned to use my immigration status as leverage, the timeline showing 3 years of systematic deception. And I'd included one more thing, a letter written in my own hand on my family stationery that still bore the Harrison crest, a reminder of who I actually was. "Dear Apex Innovations Board of Directors, my name is Emily Moore, née Harrison, of London. I hold a master's degree in art history from Oxford University, where I graduated with first-class honors. Before my marriage, I ran a successful art consultancy in London, specializing in contemporary British artists and working with galleries throughout Europe. I am the granddaughter of Margaret Harrison, who served on the boards of both Sotheby's and the Tate Modern. I am the great-great-granddaughter of William Harrison, whose textile empire helped define British industry in the 19th century. My family has been in business for over 150 years. I am not the unemployed, dependent housewife my husband has portrayed me as. I have substantial, independent assets. I have professional connections throughout the international art and business community. I have skills and education that could have been valuable to your company, had anyone bothered to ask. Instead, I was hidden, diminished, erased from my husband's professional life while he built a public relationship with another woman. I was kept ignorant of his business dealings while he made plans to divorce me in a way that would maximize his financial gain and minimize my options. You're about to trust this man with a $200 million merger. You're about to make him even wealthier and more powerful. I thought you deserved to know exactly who he is. Not the man he pretends to be in board meetings, but the man he actually is, when he thinks no one important is watching. I have attached comprehensive documentation of his deception. I leave it to you to determine what this says about his character and his fitness to lead. Respectfully, Emily Harrison Moore. That afternoon, while Daniel was supposed to be presenting the final merger details to the board, I was sitting in a cafe in Capitol Hill, drinking proper English breakfast tea and reading a book I'd bought from the bookstore next door. Actually reading, for the first time in months, enjoying the simple pleasure of words on a page without the weight of someone else's disappointment pressing down on me. My phone rang at 3:47. It was Daniel. I let it go to voicemail, listened to his message. "Emily, what the hell did you do? Call me back, now." Then it rang again, and again, and again, each call more frantic than the last. I held all the cards now. Finally, on the 7th call, I answered. "Emily." His voice was shaking. With rage, with panic, I couldn't tell, and I didn't care. "What the fuck did you do?" I told the truth, Daniel. Something you seem incapable of doing. "You sent confidential emails to the board. You contacted our investors. Do you have any idea what you've done? This is corporate sabotage. This is consequences," I interrupted. "Something you've been avoiding for 3 years. You've destroyed everything. The board has put the merger on hold. They're questioning my fitness to lead. Sarah is what? Upset? Worried? Discovering that lying is costs? I truly don't care what Sarah is feeling." There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing, calculating, trying to figure out how to manage this, how to spin it, how to regain control. "How long have you known?" he finally asked. "Long enough." "Emily, we can fix this. We can work this out. Just tell them you made a mistake, that you misunderstood, that you were emotional and confused and—" "No." "What?" I said no, Daniel. I'm not fixing this for you. I'm not making myself smaller so you can be bigger. I'm not pretending anymore. I'm not being understanding. I'm not being accommodating. I'm not being any of the things you trained me to be so that I'd be easier to deceive. You don't understand what you've done. You've ruined. I freed myself, I said, surprised by how calm my voice was. From a man who was using me as a prop while building a real life with someone else. From a marriage that was always an illusion. From the pretense that I'm weak or helpless or dependent on you. From the lie that I need you more than you need me. If you go through with this, I'll make sure you get nothing in the divorce. I'll fight you on everything. You'll be deported back to England with nothing. I laughed. Actually laughed. The sound surprised both of us. Daniel, I don't need anything from you. I never did. I have my own money. More money than you ever knew about. I have my own immigration lawyer. I have my own plans. I have my own life waiting for me. You were just the detour I had to take to find my way back to myself. You're bluffing. Try me. I hung up. They finally understood that the quiet British wife wasn't so quiet anymore. The merger collapsed within 2 weeks. TechCore's due diligence team, already nervous about leadership stability, discovered that the CEO they were planning to install as head of their Northwest division was a man who'd been living a double life, using company resources to maintain a secret apartment, taking his mistress on business trips funded by corporate accounts, planning to manipulate a divorce while timing it for maximum personal financial gain. They pulled their offer. $200 million evaporated because Daniel couldn't keep his lies straight. Apex's board voted 9-2 to remove Daniel as CEO. The scandal was too much, the breach of trust too profound, the risk to their reputations too great. Sarah left him 3 days after the merger collapsed. I learned this from Jennifer, Daniel's assistant, who called me to apologize for all the years she'd helped maintain his deception. She'd been the one scheduling his double life, booking his secret dinners, coordinating his calendar so I never saw the truth. "I'm so sorry, Emily. I should have said something. I should have told you." "You were protecting your job, I understand." For what it's worth, Sarah is gone. The moment his money disappeared, so did she. She issued a statement to the press claiming she'd been manipulated, that she hadn't known he was married. But we all saw them together for 3 years. We all knew. Turns out Sarah was less interested in Daniel Moore, the disgraced former CEO, than she was in Daniel Moore, the soon-to-be multimillionaire. When the fortune disappeared, so did the love. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I didn't fight for alimony or spousal support. I didn't need it. What I had was worth so much more than whatever he could have given me. What I took was the house. The one I decorated, maintained, and filled with my labor for 6 years while he lived his real life elsewhere. My lawyer argued that since I'd been the one actually living there, maintaining it, treating it as a home while Daniel had essentially used it as a storage unit for his fake life, it should be mine. The judge agreed. What I took was half of his remaining assets, significantly smaller than they would have been if the merger had gone through, but still substantial, enough that I would never have to depend on anyone again. What I took was my name back. Emily Harrison. Not hyphenated, not Moore. Harrison, the name I'd been born with, the name that connected me to women who didn't accept being diminished. But more importantly, I found my real family, the board members who'd seen my letter, who'd taken the time to research my actual background, who'd been impressed by my honesty and precision, contacted me with opportunities. Christopher introduced me to collectors throughout Seattle, Vancouver, San Francisco. Within 3 months, I'd launched a new art consultancy specializing in connecting American tech wealth with contemporary British and European artists. My first commission was placing a $3 million collection for one of the investors who'd pulled out of the Apex merger. He said he trusted my judgment more than Daniel's. That character mattered. That integrity couldn't be faked. Within 6 months, I'd placed more than £5 million worth of art. My business was thriving. My independence was complete. My life was finally, actually, mine. I moved back to London 8 months after the divorce was finalized, not running away, returning home. I bought a flat in Notting Hill, 3 floors with high ceilings and crown molding and windows that overlooked Portobello Road. I could walk to galleries. I could have tea with my mother every Sunday. I could speak with my own accent without apologizing for it or softening it or hiding it. I joined the board of a small contemporary gallery in Shoreditch, the same neighborhood where I'd worked before I'd given everything up for a man who'd never deserved the sacrifice. The gallery director, an old friend from my Oxford days, welcomed me back with champagne and tears. "We thought we'd lost you to America forever." "I was never really there," I said. "I was just lost for a while." Last week I had coffee with my mother at our favorite spot in Notting Hill. She looked at me, really looked at me, and her eyes filled with tears. "You've come back to yourself." She was right. For 6 years, I'd been performing the role Daniel needed me to play. The quiet wife, the decorative accessory, the woman who didn't ask questions or demand space or insist on being seen as a whole person. The woman who made herself smaller so he could feel bigger. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who'd learned that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so completely yourself that you realize how much smaller your life was before, how much you'd been holding back to make room for someone who didn't deserve the space. Daniel sent me an email last month. I recognized his address even though I'd deleted his contact information. The subject line said simply, "Regrets." Inside was a brief message, part apology, part justification, tinged with resentment and self-pity. "Emily, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I need you to understand that I never meant to hurt you. Things just happened. Sarah and I connected in a way that felt right. You and I had grown apart. You must have felt it too. I'm sorry for how I handled things. I should have been honest sooner. But you have to understand the pressure I was under. The company, the investors, the expectations. I needed someone who understood that world, someone who could be a partner in that life. I hope you're doing well. I hope you found happiness, and I hope someday you can forgive me." Would you consider reaching out to the investor community? Letting them know that time has passed, that mistakes were made on both sides? The professional consequences have been severe. I'm trying to rebuild, and your continued silence isn't helping. Best, Daniel. I read it once. Then I deleted it. I didn't need to respond. I didn't need to forgive him or help him rebuild or make anything easier for him. His consequences were his to manage. Because Daniel's real punishment isn't his failed career, or his lost merger, or his public humiliation, or the fact that Sarah left him the moment his money disappeared. It's living with the knowledge that he had someone real, someone educated, connected, capable, valuable, someone with her own fortune and her own family legacy and her own strength, someone who loved him completely and would have been an actual partner if he'd ever bothered to see her. And he chose to hide her away in favor of an illusion he thought was more impressive. He traded someone with depth for someone with a right look. He chose appearance over substance, and he lost everything because of it. The best revenge is living well, and I'm living very well indeed. I'm Emily Harrison. I'm 34 years old. I'm from London, and I'm exactly where I belong. My consultancy is expanding into European markets. I'm advising collectors in Paris and Berlin. I'm planning an exhibition of contemporary British artists at a gallery in Milan. I have dinner with friends who've known me since I was 20 and still see me as the person I've always been. I wake up in my flat overlooking Portobello Road, make myself proper English breakfast tea in a pot, not a bag, and read the morning papers without anyone sighing or rushing me or making me feel like my simple pleasures are somehow inadequate. I date occasionally. Nothing serious yet. But there's a barrister named Thomas who takes me to the theater and actually listens when I talk about art, who thinks my accent is beautiful, who says he admires how I rebuilt my life after everything fell apart, who treats me like I'm someone worth knowing, not someone who needs to be managed or hidden or diminished. I found my real family, not in the marriage that almost destroyed me, but in the community that saw my worth when I finally let them, in my mother, who never stopped believing I'd find my way back, in Richard, my financial advisor, who protected my inheritance even when I wasn't strong enough to protect myself, in Christopher and Marcus and all the people who took my side when it would have been easier to stay neutral, in myself, finally. The person I'd always been under all that accommodation and silence. 6 years ago, I crossed an ocean for love. I gave up everything I'd built to support someone else's dreams. I made myself smaller and quieter, and less to fit into a box labeled corporate wife. Now I've crossed back. Not in defeat, in triumph. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remember who you were before someone made you forget. Sometimes freedom comes disguised as loss. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is the doorway to the best thing you could never have imagined. I decided to visit my husband at his job as a CEO. At the entrance, there was a sign that said, "Authorized personnel only." When I told the guard I was the CEO's wife, he laughed and said he saw his wife every day. That moment broke me open. But breaking open is how the light gets in. Share your story in the comments if you've ever felt invisible in your own life. If you've ever made yourself smaller to make someone else comfortable. If you've ever forgotten who you were trying to be, who someone else needed. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is refusing to disappear. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is take up space. Sometimes love means knowing when to stop accommodating and start protecting yourself. I'm Emily Harrison, and I'm done being invisible. 1 year later, I stand in a gallery in London surrounded by my work, my choices, my life. The woman who made scones and waited for scraps of attention is gone. In her place is someone who knows exactly what she's worth and refuses to accept anything less.